Hi everybody, and welcome to the latest VodCast for Honors Biology at Desert Ridge High School. I'm Mr. Galladay, and today we're going to be talking about meiosis. Meiosis, as we will see, is a type of cell division, and it will show you that sometimes when we divide 1 by 2, we get 4. And if that seems a little strange, then stay tuned and we'll see how that works. This is a good place to update your table of contents in your notebook. And here we go. First of all, we're going to start off with a little review. Some of this stuff may be familiar to you, maybe in a different way than you've thought about before, and the human reproductive life cycle. And so, as you probably know, we all started off as a single egg and a single sperm cell that then joined together in a process of it's called fertilization, and that resulted in a single fertilized egg cell. That fertilized egg, as we'll see, is called a zygote, and that particular cell then goes through a number of cell divisions, mitotic cell divisions, many cell divisions, and they result in you. They result in you being a multicellular organism which has several 100 trillion cells. You weren't, of course, born with the stylish clothing that those two models are wearing for us, but at any rate, you are now a large multicellular organism. Those two individuals then in their organs called the gonads collectively, which are either the ovary or the testes, there are specialized cells which undergo this process of meiosis. And meiosis is the process then that makes the sperm in the male and the egg cells in the female. Okay, so when you look at this like I do, you may be reminded that it's the circle of life, and it moves us all. What? You don't like my singing? Okay, alright, okay, alright, I won't sing, okay, fine. Okay, anyway. So there's some vocabulary that we need to know about meiosis and some particular terms that we need to know. First term is diploid, okay, and what diploid means essentially is two sets. The di prefix refers to two, and as you probably know, we all have 46 chromosomes, and that is 23 pairs, 23 from mom, which came from mom's egg, and 23 chromosomes which came from dad's sperm, and those create our total of 46 pairs. This is true in every one of our somatic cells, or body cells. All of our body cells are diploid. They all contain the same 46 chromosomes. That's 23 pairs. Now, each pair of those chromosomes is what we call a homologous pair. A homologous pair means that they have the same information on them, or they have the same genes. Now, they may have different forms of those genes, but they each represent a member of a pair. Okay, so it comes from the opposite sex parent, right? So each of these chromosomes, this would be chromosome 1, this would be chromosome 1. The chromosome 1 from mom, the chromosome 1 from dad. Okay, that's what we mean by the homologous pairs. Now, if you remember about our chromosomes, each chromosome starts off as containing two identical chromatids, right? So when we look at this, when we look at these two homologous pairs, there are actually 4 chromatids, right? So these two would start off being identical to each other. These two would start off being identical to each other, and then each of these chromosomes are homologous, right? So we have a total of 4 chromatids, which makes up what we call a tetrad. All right. Now, when we separate one of those chromatids, right, and put those into a cell, we now have what we call a haploid cell. That means one set. It contains one set of chromosomes. So our egg starts off having 23 chromosomes, which is haploid, having one set, and our sperm starts off with 23 chromosomes, having one set of chromosomes, right? Collectively, the egg and sperm cells are called gametes, which are the sex cells. Those are all sex cells are haploid. Okay, and the process of going from a diploid cell to a haploid cell is called meiosis. Okay, and we do indeed start off with one individual cell. And then when we divide that cell, we divide it a couple of times, and we end up with 4 cells, and that is the process of meiosis. And as we said at the beginning, sometimes 1 divided by 2 gives us 4, and that is indeed the case here, that we end up with 4 cells, and as we will see, they are not identical, they are all unique. Okay, important thing to understand here. When we talk about a mitotic cell division, in other words, a cell that divides sort of as we might think of normally using the process of mitosis, that produces 2 identical diploid cells, right? So if you start off with a cell with 46 chromosomes, you end up with a cell, two identical cells, each which have 46 chromosomes. This happens in all of our body cells. This happens in all of our, that is to say, our somatic cells. Okay, and this happens whenever we need to grow or repair, right? So cell damage, when cells are damaged, they are repaired by mitotic cell divisions using the process of mitosis. As we grow, those are mitotic cell divisions, which is what we've studied already, sort of the normal cell division. Okay, meiosis is a little bit different, as we've already seen. These are meiotic cell divisions. They produce 4 genetically unique haploid cells. So if we start off with a cell having one cell having 46 chromosomes, we're going to end up with 4 cells having 23 chromosomes, and each of them will be unique. None of them will be identical. And this only occurs in our reproductive organs, only in the ovaries of females or in the testes of males. All right, so that is, again, a very distinct difference between meiosis and mitosis. And these produce specialized cells. These are only cells that are used in reproduction. Okay, unlike mitosis, which occurs in all of our cells, meiosis only occurs in ovaries and testes, and they only produce these specialized sex cells or specialized gametes. Okay, so here's a way to think about these different types of cells. So a haploid cell, such as an egg or a sperm, would contain one set of each of these chromosomes. So these are 2 different chromosomes. Okay, so this chromosome, for instance, has a gene for growth hormone, a gene for hair color, a gene for hemoglobin. This chromosome has a gene for DNA polymerase, a gene for eye color, and so on. Okay, but each gamete would only have one of these. Okay, each of your body cells would have 2 of these. So these are homologous. This is a homologous pair, right? You got one set of chromosomes from mom, one set of chromosomes from dad. And they have, while they have the same genes, they're going to be different alleles of those genes or different forms of those genes, right? So our growth hormone from mom would be different from the growth hormone gene that we inherit from dad. Hair color gene that we inherit from dad would be different from the hair color gene that we inherit from mom, and so on. So these are what we mean by homologous pairs, which would be in a diploid cell. Okay? Oh, okay, so there's our chromosome from mom at the top, chromosome from dad at the bottom. Okay, another way to look at this is a karyotype. So this shows all of the chromosomes that an individual has. Half of those chromosomes came from mom, half came from dad. And they are each chromosome, right, each of these chromosomes contains two identical chromatids. So if we look closely, for example, this is chromosome 1. If we look very closely at this, you can see that this chromosome actually is two that are sitting there very closely together. Same thing here. This is two identical chromatids. So what do we have here? Well, we have a tetrad. We actually have a group of 4 chromatids, okay, which is how we end up with 4 chromosomes during meiosis. Okay, so what happens in meiosis? Well, the first thing it does is it randomly separates the homologous pairs. Okay, so each of these is split apart. So now instead of having 46 chromosomes, 23 pairs, we now just have 23 individual chromosomes. So this is one of the pairs from chromosome 1, one from chromosome 2, and so on. Okay? So meiosis then randomly separates the chromatids. So each chromatid from these then goes into its own cell. Okay? So meiosis, as we said, only occurs in the gonads, and it only produces gametes. Okay? So we start off with a total of 23 pairs of chromosomes, and it first separates the homologous pairs, right? So the homologous pairs divide up, and they divide up randomly, and then the chromatids from each chromosome separate. Okay, so each of the new gamete cells has one of the chromatids from the homologous pair. Okay, if that wasn't enough, there is actually something else that happens during meiosis, and that is a thing called crossing over. Okay, during crossing over, the DNA that makes up the chromosomes are actually sort of chopped and cut and pasted, and so you end up with the chromatids are no longer identical. They actually go through this process of crossing over and end up with, you actually end up with 4 chromatids, which are all unique. Okay, so let's just explain, give a good definition for crossing over. It's a recombination of the genetic material. Okay, so recombination means we're taking a little bit from this one and we're substituting it in another one. And it results in an exchange of DNA between homologous chromosomes. So we see here we've colored them differently just to make this show up. So this one ends up with a little bit from the blue one, and the blue one ends up with a little bit from the red one, right? So we end up exchanging this this genetic material between these two identical or homologous chromatids. Here's another picture that shows how this happens. And during meiosis, this happens many, many, many times. So what you actually get is each chromosome that ends up in a gamete is actually a sort of a mishmash of the chromosomes that you inherited from your mom and from your dad. And in fact, the chromosomes that you inherited from each parent are actually a mishmash of their parents that they inherited from their parents. So what this does is this gives us a greater variety, a greater genetic amount of genetic variation in our chromosomes than we otherwise would if this didn't happen. Okay? So here's an important piece to know is that sexual reproduction produces genetic variation in 3 different ways. And yes, you will need to know these 3 different ways. First of all, crossing over produces unique chromosomes. So when crossing over happens, we get 4 unique chromosomes. Also, the independent assortment of chromosomes. During meiosis, those the gametes end up with unique combinations. So when those homologous pairs separate, we get a unique combination of the chromosomes from each parent, right? So those separate randomly. And then the final thing that happens is during fertilization, you have a random egg and a random sperm that join to produce zygotes or fertilized eggs with unique combination of chromosomes. So we have each of these process is sort of a rolling of the dice, is sort of a random process that produces so your gametes, none of your offspring are going to look identical, but all of them are going to have characteristics from you. Okay, so here's a little animation to show how this works. Is that we start off with a diploid cell with two homologous pairs. The DNA then replicates, right? So now we have each of these chromosomes has an identical chromatid. The next thing that happens is crossing over occurs. So all of our chromatids are now unique. Okay, and in the first division of meiosis, what we end up with is are the homologous pairs separate, and they separate randomly. So we've got one random process that happens here, another random process that happens here, and then during the second mitotic division, now we end up with each of these cells, each of the gametes has one set of chromosomes. So we started off with 4 chromosomes here, and now you'll notice that each of the gametes, each of the resulting cells, only has 2 chromosomes. Okay, so we end up with half the number of chromosomes. This is a diploid cell because it has 2 sets, a homologous pair of each chromosome. These are now haploid. They only have 1 set of chromosomes. So the important thing here is meiosis produces 4 genetically unique haploid cells. Okay, here's a quick review. Meiosis produces daughter cells that are identical to the parent cell. Is that true or false? What are 2 ways that meiosis produces genetic variation? Remember, we said reproduction has 3 ways of producing genetic variation, but meiosis produces genetic variation 2 ways. What are they? What is separated during the first part of meiosis, and what is separated during the second part of meiosis? You might want to answer these on the left-hand page of your notebook. This is some output. And where in the body does meiosis take place? Where is meiosis happening? Okay, another piece of a quick review is let's go through this little reproductive diagram that we had before. We have multicellular adults. Are those cells haploid or diploid? How many chromosomes are in each cell? Okay, what is this process? Where does it take place? Where does it take place in females? Where does it take place in males? The next thing that happens is what are these cells called, right? What is the name of this cell? What is the name of this cell? What are collectively, what are they called? How many chromosomes does each of these cells have? Okay, are these cells haploid or diploid? The next thing that happens, we have these 2 cells joined together. What is that process called? We end up with another type of cell. What is that called? How many chromosomes does it have? Is it haploid or diploid? Okay. That cell goes through some development to create these multicellular organisms. How does this happen? What type of cell division results in these multicellular organisms? Okay, that wraps up our discussion of meiosis. This is Mr. Galladay for Desert Ridge High School in Honors Biology, and I hope you have a great day.